By late May, the Copernicus Climate Change Service had flagged an early Western European heatwave. Parts of Western France, England and Wales were running more than 10 degrees Celsius above normal, while heat health alerts were already active. One signal would be unusual. Several signals together are harder to dismiss. According to Copernicus, the strongest heat built between May 21st and May 30th. The United Kingdom Met Office reported 35.1 degrees Celsius at Kew Gardens, breaking the national May temperature record for the second day in a row. Santé Publique France reported 17 departments under orange heatwave alert across 5 regions, affecting 26% of the resident population for at least one day. The United Kingdom Health Security Agency issued its first amber heat health alert of the year before June had even begun. But that is not the most dangerous part. The headline is not only the afternoon peak, the hidden number is the overnight minimum temperature, the number that decides whether the body gets time to recover. This is not just a heat wave, this is a nighttime recovery failure arriving before the system's summer clock. So the question is no longer simply how hot Europe became in May. The question is what happens when trapped heat reaches the body, the hospital, the grid, the road, the farm, the water system, and the city before those systems believe summer has started. Like, subscribe, and comment where you are watching from, because this map is not only showing heat, it is showing where preparedness may fail first. But to see that failure, enter the dashboard. At first, the dashboard does not look like a disaster. It looks like ordinary public information, a temperature map, a health alert, a national weather update, a short bulletin from a public health agency, a line on a climate service page showing color over Western Europe. Each signal has its own format, its own office, its own threshold, and its own audience. The weather office speaks to forecasters and the public. The health agency speaks to hospitals, care homes, local authorities, and emergency planners. The climate service speaks in anomalies, reanalysis, and regional patterns. The city sees schoolyards, transport, water fountains, work crews, and apartment blocks. On their own, these signals could be treated separately. Together, they describe one larger configuration. By the second half of May, the Copernicus Climate Change Service was already showing the heat pattern from above. The strongest part of the event, built mainly between May 21st and May 30th, the largest temperature anomalies sat over Western France, England, and Wales, where daily average temperatures reached more than 10 degrees Celsius above average. That is the first dashboard light. It does not say only that one city had a hot day. It says that a large piece of Western Europe was operating outside its normal late spring temperature range. Then the national records started to move. The United Kingdom Met Office reported 35.1 degrees Celsius at Kew Gardens in Greater London. Heathrow reached 35 degrees Celsius. Other stations across southern and eastern England climbed into the mid-30s. The important detail is not only the peak. The important detail is that the old May record had already been broken the day before, and then broken again. The dashboard was not showing one spike. It was showing a record being rewritten while the event was still underway. That is the second light. Then the health system began to appear on the map. The United Kingdom Health Security Agency issued its first amber heat health alert of the year before June had begun. An amber alert is not a weather curiosity. It means impacts are likely to be felt across the whole health and social care system, not only among the most vulnerable. It is a signal meant for people who run hospitals, community care, ambulance services, care homes, and local response plans. It means heat is no longer only outside, it has crossed into the operating assumptions of public health. That is the third light. Then France began to show the same pattern in another language. According to Santé Publique France, 17 departments were placed under orange heatwave alert across 5 regions, including Brittany, Île-de-France, Normandy, Nouvelle-Aquitaine, and Pays de la Loire. The alert affected 26% of the resident population for at least one day. The orange alert ended on May 30th, but the number matters because it turns the map into people. 1/4 of a country is not a local hot afternoon. It is a public health footprint. That is the fourth light. At the same time, the pattern was not confined to the 2 countries most visible in English headlines. Western Europe was sharing the same atmospheric setup. Copernicus described the heat as unusually early and intense. Portugal recorded extreme May heat, with Moura reaching 40.3 degrees Celsius. France saw temperatures climb into territory more familiar to summer. Ireland also recorded unusual late spring heat. Across the region, meteorological spring was no longer behaving like the season that infrastructure, schedules, and human habits expected. This is where the story changes. A normal weather story asks where the hottest place is. An operational story asks which systems are now receiving load. The first system is the body. Heat does not wait for an official summer date before it begins acting on a person. It enters through skin, breath, sleep, hydration, medication, age, illness, and work. When the air stays hot in the afternoon, the body works harder. When the air stays warm at night, the body loses its recovery window. That is why the health alert matters. A health agency does not issue an amber warning because a number looks dramatic on a chart. It issues one because heat is expected to reach living systems. The second system is housing. In a mild climate, many homes are built to retain warmth, not release it. A brick wall that is useful in winter can store heat in May. A top-floor apartment can become warmer than the street. A window can face the late sun. A bedroom can stay hot after sunset. A fan can move air without lowering the temperature. A person can open a window and find that the outside air offers no relief. The dashboard may show a regional anomaly. Inside the building, the same anomaly becomes a room that will not cool. The third system is healthcare. A heat health alert is also a message to emergency departments, general practitioners, care homes, social care teams, and ambulance services. It tells them that the risk is not evenly distributed. Older people, infants, pregnant people, outdoor workers, people with heart or kidney disease, people using certain medications, people living alone, and people in poorly cooled housing do not experience the same heat as a healthy person sitting near water for an afternoon. The same temperature can be a nuisance for one body and a medical load for another. The fourth system is transport. Extreme heat changes surfaces. Roads soften, rails expand, signals, power lines, and equipment can be stressed. Trains may slow. People wait on platforms without shade. Bus stops become exposed heat traps. Walking routes that are manageable in April can become difficult in May when the temperature jumps into summer territory. Heat does not need to break the entire transport network to create risk. It only needs to slow a route, delay a caregiver, trap a worker in traffic, or make a commute physically harder for someone already carrying heat stress. The fifth system is energy. Early heat changes demand. People who have cooling equipment use it. People who do not have cooling equipment improvise. Shops, offices, hospitals, care homes, data centers, refrigerated storage, and transit systems all manage heat differently from households. The grid does not only see a number on a thermometer, it sees a pattern of demand arriving before the season when operators, consumers, and building managers expect it. When heat arrives early, the question is not only peak temperature, it is whether spare capacity, maintenance schedules, and emergency plans are aligned with the new calendar. The sixth system is water. Hot weather pulls people toward rivers, lakes, reservoirs, and beaches. It increases the need for drinking water in homes, schools, worksites, hospitals, parks, and public spaces. It dries soil and vegetation. It changes the behavior of crowds. It turns ordinary public places into heat refuges. But if lifeguard staffing, warning signs, water access, public toilets, shaded areas, and emergency services are still working on a late spring assumption, then the water system is not simply a resource. It becomes part of the risk map. The seventh system is work. In May, many schedules are still arranged as if the main heat season is ahead. Outdoor work may not yet have shifted to cooler hours. Uniforms may not be adjusted. Break patterns may still follow ordinary routines. Schools may not be prepared for overheated classrooms. Care visits may not be rescheduled around the worst heat. Delivery workers, construction workers, farm workers, road crews, and public maintenance teams may move through a city that has physically entered summer, while the workplace calendar has not. The eighth system is agriculture. Late spring is not empty time. It is a sensitive part of the growing season. Heat changes evaporation. It changes soil moisture. It changes plant stress. It can accelerate development, shorten windows for field work, and push irrigation demand earlier. The heat wave is not just a city event. It moves across fields, orchards, pastures, and stored water. Farmers do not experience it as a red area on a map. They experience it as timing. A crop can tolerate a hot day differently depending on when that hot day arrives. This is why the word early matters. Early does not simply mean unusual on a calendar. Early means warning systems may be active before they are expected. Early means a hospital may still be planning for summer rather than already operating inside it. Early means a school may not yet have its heat routine in place. Early means a care home may not yet be in its strictest monitoring pattern. Early means a worker may not yet have adjusted shift hours. Early means the public may treat heat as pleasant weather because the season still says spring. That is the abnormal pattern. The atmosphere moved first, the institutions followed. By the time a public alert appears, the heat has already crossed several thresholds. It has crossed a meteorological threshold in the data. It has crossed a record threshold at the observing station. It has crossed a health threshold inside the alert system. It has crossed a social threshold when people change behavior, travel to water, work through hotter hours, sleep badly, or check on relatives. The official dashboard is not the beginning of the event. It is the moment when different parts of the system admit that the same pressure is being felt. That pressure is not distributed evenly. In London, the record number drew attention because 35.1 degrees Celsius is visibly extreme for May. But a high temperature at Kew Gardens does not tell the whole city's risk. A shaded park, an air-conditioned office, a basement flat, a top-floor room, a hospital ward, a care home bedroom, a construction site, and a crowded train platform are not the same thermal environment. The official station gives a standardized measurement. The body receives a local one. In France, the orange alert across 17 departments gave the system a defined geography, but inside that geography, risk followed smaller lines. It followed age, it followed housing quality, it followed income, it followed whether someone could leave work, it followed whether someone had a doctor, a neighbor, a fan, a cool room, a shaded street, or a phone call. 26% of the population under at least 1 day of orange alert is a national number. Inside it are millions of different exposure pathways. In Portugal, a 40-degree May temperature is a national extreme. But the operational question is not only where the thermometer peaked, it is what else was happening when it peaked. Were people outdoors? Were homes cooling at night? Was the grid under stress? Were health services prepared for early heat? Were public warnings reaching tourists, workers, older residents, and people without strong local networks? A record is a point. A heatwave is a system moving through points. The dashboard also reveals something harder to see. Preparedness is not one switch. A government can have a heat plan and still face a preparedness gap. A health agency can send alerts and still depend on whether local services have staff. A weather office can forecast the heat and still not control housing quality. A city can open cooling spaces and still miss people who cannot travel. A hospital can prepare and still receive patients whose risk began in a bedroom days earlier. A family can know heat is coming and still lack money, mobility, or equipment to change the indoor temperature. This is why the event cannot be reduced to one record. A record is dramatic. A dashboard is diagnostic. The record tells the public that something exceptional happened. The dashboard tells operators where the exceptional condition is starting to enter the system. The climate service sees the anomaly. The weather office sees the station record. The health agency sees population risk. The emergency system sees calls. The hospital sees admissions. The household sees sleep. The worker sees fatigue. The farmer sees timing. The grid sees demand. The city sees exposure. And all of it happened before the old summer clock had fully started. That is the central warning of this May heatwave. The map did not only show a hot region, it showed a mismatch between atmospheric timing and human preparation. The atmosphere was already in a summer mode. Many systems were still partly in spring mode. The danger was not just that temperatures rose. The danger was that they rose early enough to catch routines, buildings, services, and bodies before they had shifted into heat defense. This is not just a heat wave. This is a nighttime recovery failure, arriving before the system's summer clock. The next clue is the number that made the headlines. It looks simple. It looks like a temperature. But when a spring day reaches a midsummer operating level, that number stops being only weather. It becomes a measure of how far the season has been pulled out of position. The number that made people stop was 35.1 degrees Celsius. In Fahrenheit, that is about 95.2 degrees. According to the United Kingdom Met Office, that reading was recorded at Kew Gardens in Greater London on May 26th. It was not only hot for May, It provisionally broke the United Kingdom's May temperature record for the second day in a row. The day before, Kew Gardens had reached 34.8 degrees Celsius. Before that, the United Kingdom's May record had stood at 32.8 degrees Celsius, reached in 1922 and again in 1944. That is why the number matters. It was not a record nudged upward by a tenth of a degree. It was a spring record being pushed into territory that would be remarkable even in summer. The old threshold had already been crossed. Then the atmosphere kept going. The record did not behave like a fixed line at the edge of the known climate. It behaved like a door, and the heat moved through it. The number is not just temperature, it is the seasonal operating calendar being pulled out of position. 35.1 degrees Celsius in late May is not only a hot afternoon in London, it is a signal that the atmosphere has placed a midsummer load onto a late spring system. Schools, trains, hospitals, care homes, work crews, homes, parks, and roads do not respond to the calendar written on a wall. They respond to physical load. And on that day, the load was not late spring. It was summer arriving early in the operating language of the body and the city. To understand the size of that shift, start with a comparison that looks simple but is not simple at all. 1 degree Celsius can change comfort, 2 degrees can change thresholds, 5 degrees can change behavior, 10 degrees can move an entire day into another season. Copernicus reported daily average temperatures more than 10 degrees Celsius above average across parts of western France, England, and Wales during the strongest part of the heat wave. 10 degrees Celsius is 18 degrees Fahrenheit. It is the difference between a manageable spring day and a day that begins to act like a different part of the year. That is the meaning of anomaly. An anomaly is not the same as the temperature you feel when you walk outside. It is the difference between what happened and what the climate record says would normally be expected for that place and time of year. A city can be warm and still not be anomalous if it is supposed to be warm. A city can be dangerous without reaching a famous all-time record if the heat arrives in a season when the systems around it are not prepared. The anomaly tells you how far the day has been pulled away from its normal position. In this case, the day was pulled hard. More than 10 degrees Celsius above average means the atmosphere was not merely adding warmth, it was relocating the season. A late May day was being forced to carry a thermal burden more typical of high summer. People may still be thinking about spring clothes, spring school terms, spring maintenance schedules, spring outdoor events, spring work routines, and spring tourism, but the air was no longer respecting that frame. This is where the headline number becomes a system number. 35.1 degrees Celsius sounds like one station, one measurement, one point on a map. But a station measurement is not isolated from the world around it. It tells operators what kind of environment is pressing on a region. At that level, the sun does not only warm skin, it heats walls, it heats asphalt, it heats rail lines, it heats parked cars, it heats bus shelters, it heats playground equipment, it heats hospital roofs, it heats the top floors of apartment blocks. It heats places where people do not have many choices. A thermometer records air temperature, a city receives stored heat. That difference matters because the official number is measured under controlled conditions. It is designed to be consistent, comparable, and scientifically useful. The body is not living inside that measuring enclosure. The body is on a pavement, in a bedroom, in a care home, in a warehouse, in a school, in a train carriage, in a field, on a bike, in a kitchen, on a delivery route, or behind a window that has been absorbing sun for hours. The official number is clean. Real exposure is messy. That is why 35.1 degrees Celsius cannot be treated as a single dramatic peak and then forgotten. The number spreads. It enters surfaces, it enters buildings, it enters schedules, it enters decisions, it enters the question of whether an older person should open a window, it enters whether a parent lets a child walk home. It enters whether an outdoor worker can continue. It enters whether a train platform becomes tolerable or punishing. It enters whether a room is still safe at midnight. The headline is 35.1. The real story is what that number activates. At Heathrow, the Met Office reported 35 degrees Celsius on the same day. That matters because airports are not just weather stations. They are dense systems of hard surfaces, aircraft operations, workers, passengers, tarmac, transport links, and buildings. Heat at an airport is never only heat in the air. It becomes heat on surfaces, heat for staff, heat for passengers waiting in queues, heat around equipment, heat in vehicles, and heat inside the wider transport network that feeds the airport. In Wales, Cardiff Butte Park reached 32.9 degrees Celsius. That number matters for a different reason. It shows the heat was not simply a London story. A national record can focus attention on the highest station, but the wider pattern tells you how much of the region was being pulled into abnormal territory. When a park in Cardiff reaches that kind of late May heat, the issue is not only the place where the maximum was highest, the issue is how many communities were being asked to behave as if summer had arrived. Western France showed the same seasonal displacement. According to Copernicus, some of the largest positive anomalies were across Western France as well as England and Wales. That matters because the event was regional, not local. A local hot day can be handled by local habits. A regional heatwave is different. It reduces escape options. It makes surrounding areas hot too. It places multiple cities, towns, hospitals, farms, transport systems, and water systems under pressure at the same time. It means that help, relief, supplies, staffing, and cooling options may all be affected by the same atmospheric pattern. This is how a headline number becomes operational. It starts as a maximum temperature, then it becomes a question of distribution. Where is the heat highest? Where is it most unusual? Where is it arriving earliest? Where are buildings least prepared? Where are people least able to cool themselves? Where are services still on spring assumptions? Where are roads, rails, care homes, classrooms, clinics, and bedrooms already carrying yesterday's heat when today's heat begins? A maximum temperature is a point in time. A heat wave is load repeated. That is why the phrase 35.1 degrees Celsius does not fully describe the event. It gives the most visible edge of the event. It tells the public when to pay attention. It gives newspapers a number. It gives history a record. But systems do not only fail at the record point, they fail when repeated load arrives faster than recovery. They fail when a warm morning follows a hot night. They fail when buildings begin the day already overheated. They fail when staff are tired before a shift begins. They fail when vulnerable people do not cool down before the next afternoon arrives. The headline number is the alarm bell. It is not the whole fire. There is another reason the number is unsettling. It arrived in May. The same temperature in August would still be dangerous. It would still carry health risks. It would still stress cities, transport, and housing. But August is at least inside the mental map of summer. People expect heat. Agencies are in summer mode. Schools, workplaces, public health teams, hospitals, parks, and local governments are more likely to have heat procedures in mind. The public may be more aware of hydration, shade, sunscreen, open windows, closed curtains, and checking on older relatives. May is different. In May, warmth can still be mistaken for good news. A hot weekend can look like an invitation rather than a warning. Parks fill, beaches fill, outdoor work continues. People may travel, exercise, drink alcohol, stay in the sun, or underestimate the risk because the calendar says spring. The psychological gap matters. The atmosphere can move faster than public perception. A warning can be issued, but if people still interpret the day as pleasant early summer, the warning has to fight against the season in their mind. That is part of preparedness too. Preparedness is not only equipment, it is expectation. A city that expects heat later may still have shade plans, cooling spaces, public messages, and care outreach designed around a different timetable. A household may not yet have fans ready. A school may not yet have adjusted routines. A care home may not yet be operating at the intensity it uses in July. A transport operator may be managing heat risk while also handling maintenance schedules planned for spring. A farm may be facing evaporation and plant stress before irrigation and labor plans have fully shifted. The number is not just temperature, it is timing. 35.1 degrees Celsius in late May tells us that the heat is not waiting for the old social signal of summer. It does not wait for school holidays. It does not wait for official routines to feel natural. It does not wait for people to install cooling, check on relatives, change work hours, or take the first heat alert seriously. It arrives as physics. Preparedness has to translate that physics into action, but translation takes time. And early heat steals time. This is why comparing the new record to the old record matters. The previous United Kingdom May record of 32.8 degrees Celsius had stood as a benchmark from the early and mid-20th century. When the new event reached 34.8 degrees Celsius, it had already moved beyond that benchmark. When the next day reached 35.1 degrees Celsius, it showed that the peak was not a single lucky reading. It was part of a larger air mass and pressure pattern still pushing the region upward. The threshold had changed in real time. That is what makes record-breaking during an active heat wave so important. It is not only about where the final number lands. It is about the fact that the system is still loading while people are still processing the first record. The public hears that yesterday was historic, then today becomes hotter. Agencies update alerts. Forecasters update language. Hospitals and care systems watch for delayed effects. Families decide whether to check on someone. Workers decide whether to keep going. The headline number keeps moving while the response is still catching up. A single record can shock. A record broken again can unsettle. It tells you the event has momentum, but there is a trap inside the headline number. Maximum temperature is easy to see. It has a clean peak. It fits in a headline. It can be compared with old records. It gives the day a rank. Hottest May Day. New national record. More than 10 degrees above average. Those phrases are powerful because they are clear, but clarity can hide risk. The body does not experience the heat only at the moment of the afternoon maximum. It experiences the full accumulation of heat across the day and night. It experiences the warm morning, the hot afternoon, the still evening, the heated wall, the closed room, the restless sleep, and the next day that begins before recovery is complete. A maximum temperature tells you how high the load climbed. It does not tell you whether the load was released. That is the turn. The daytime record tells the public when to look. The overnight minimum tells the body whether it can recover. And in this heat wave, the next number is not as loud as 35.1 degrees Celsius. It does not look as dramatic in a headline. It does not produce the same instant shock, but it may be the number that decides whether heat remains an uncomfortable event or becomes a health emergency moving quietly through bedrooms, care homes, hospitals, and cities. The headline number pulled spring out of position, but that number is not the real trap. The real trap begins after sunset. The afternoon peak is easy to understand because it behaves like an alarm. It rises, it reaches a maximum, it breaks a record, it gives the public a clean number to repeat. 35.1 degrees Celsius, 95.2 degrees Fahrenheit. The hottest May day on record in the United Kingdom. A number like that can stop a conversation because it is sharp, visible, and dramatic. But heat does not injure the body only at the peak. Heat injures through accumulation. The hidden number is the overnight minimum temperature. That is the lowest temperature reached during the night. It is the number that tells you whether the day's heat has been released or whether it is still trapped in the air, the walls, the pavement, the bedroom, and the body. It is quieter than the daily maximum. It does not usually lead the headline. It does not look as shocking on a weather map. But in a heat wave, it can be the number that decides whether the next day begins with recovery or with debt. The visible number makes the headline. The hidden number writes the damage. According to the United Kingdom Met Office, the May daily minimum temperature record was provisionally broken on 3 consecutive nights during this heatwave. The agency also warned that some locations could experience what forecasters often call a tropical night, meaning the temperature does not fall below 20 degrees Celsius. In one place, Camborne in Cornwall, the overnight temperature stayed above 21 degrees Celsius. That may not sound extreme if you are only thinking about afternoon heat, but nighttime heat operates differently. A day at 35 degrees Celsius tells the body to defend itself. A night that stays above 20 degrees Celsius tells the body it may not get enough time to stand down. That is the difference between stress and recovery failure. During the afternoon, the body can sweat, redirect blood toward the skin, increase heart rate, and work to keep its internal temperature stable. At night, the body is supposed to reduce that load. Sleep is not passive, it is part of the cooling system. Rest is part of the emergency response. When the night stays warm, that response weakens. A hot day can be endured if the night cools the room. A hot day followed by a hot night is different. The body begins the second day already behind. The heart has worked harder. The kidneys may have conserved water. Sleep may have broken into short fragments. Medications may interact with dehydration. An older person may wake tired before the morning sun even returns. A worker may start a shift with less concentration. A patient with heart disease may carry more strain. A caregiver may miss the moment when discomfort becomes danger. This is why the overnight minimum is not just a meteorological detail, it is a recovery gauge. It tells you whether the system had time to clear the previous load. The same is true for buildings. A house can heat during the day and release warmth at night if the outside air cools enough. But if the outside air remains warm, the building cannot dump its stored heat. Walls remain warm, floors remain warm, roof spaces remain warm, top floor apartments remain warm, bedrooms remain warm. The person inside may open a window and receive air that is still too hot to help. The building begins the next day, already carrying yesterday's heat. That is how the hidden number moves from the weather station into the room. It does not arrive as an explosion, it arrives as a failure to reset. A heat wave becomes dangerous not only because the peak rises, but because the reset disappears. The morning starts warmer, the indoor temperature starts higher, the body starts less rested, the city starts with surfaces already loaded. By noon, the new heat is not being added to zero. It is being added to what remains from yesterday. That is heat debt, and debt compounds. In a normal warm spell, the evening can feel like relief. Curtains open, windows open, streets cool, people sleep, hospitals still see risk, but the system gets some space. In a heat wave with high overnight minimums, that space narrows. The evening becomes only a slower version of the day. The room remains heavy, the skin stays damp, sleep becomes shallow, the heart keeps working. The next morning, the person is not refreshed, the building is not reset, the city is not reset, the forecast shows weather, the body receives load. This is especially dangerous because the people most exposed to nighttime heat are often the people with the fewest ways to escape it. An older adult living alone may not have air conditioning. A tenant may not be allowed to install cooling. A person in a top-floor flat may face the hottest indoor conditions in the building. A care home may have some cooled common areas but not enough cooled bedrooms. A family may avoid using equipment because of electricity costs. A worker may sleep during the day after a night shift, when the room is even hotter. The hidden number is not hidden from everyone equally. For some people, it is the temperature of a bedroom that never becomes safe. This is why a public health agency treats heat differently from a weather observer. A weather observer records the air. A public health system has to ask who is inside that air, where they sleep, what medicine they take, whether they can move, whether they live alone, whether someone checks on them, whether they understand the alert, and whether the room around them can cool. The thermometer gives one number. The population turns that number into many different risks. The young, healthy, and mobile may experience a hot night as discomfort. The frail, isolated, ill, or poorly housed may experience the same night as a narrowing margin. The margin is small because the human body has limits. It can cool itself through sweating, but sweating requires water. It can move blood toward the skin, but that asks the heart to work harder. It can reduce activity, but only if the person has control over work, care duties, travel, or housing. It can seek a cooler place, but only if a cooler place exists and the person can reach it. It can recover during sleep, but only if the environment allows sleep to do its work. When the overnight minimum stays high, every one of those options becomes weaker. The problem does not always look dramatic from outside. There may be no floodwater in the street, no roof torn away, no fire line on a hill, no siren in the first hours. The damage can begin as a person turning in bed, unable to get comfortable. It can begin as a glass of water not reached. It can begin as a missed phone call. It can begin as confusion. It can begin as a fall on the way to the bathroom. It can begin as breathlessness. It can begin as a caregiver arriving in the morning and realizing the room has been too hot for too long. The event is visible outside. The damage begins inside. That inside damage is why night matters so much. Daytime heat asks people to protect themselves while they are awake. Nighttime heat attacks the period when protection is supposed to be automatic. A person can choose shade at noon. A worker can take a break if the workplace allows it. A city can issue a message. But when someone is asleep, alone, medicated, elderly, or already ill, the night becomes a test of the room itself. If the room cannot cool, the body has to keep defending itself through the hours when it should be recovering. This changes how we should read a heat wave. The maximum temperature tells us how high the event reached. The minimum temperature tells us how long the event stayed. That duration is the danger. A high peak for 1 hour is not the same as a warm burden across 24 hours. A record afternoon is not the same as 2 or 3 nights without enough cooling. Heat is not only intensity, heat is time. It is the number of hours above comfort, the number of hours above health thresholds, the number of hours a room stays warm, the number of hours a patient spends under stress, the number of hours before the next cool interval arrives. In this May heatwave, that cool interval was part of the warning. The Met Office did not only report the record daytime maximum, it also pointed to unusually high nighttime temperatures. That is the key. The same event that pushed late spring afternoons into midsummer territory also weakened the nighttime reset. The day made the record, the night made the risk. And because it happened in May, the risk became more complicated. In July or August, more people expect hot nights. They may have fans ready. They may sleep with windows open. They may check forecasts differently. Care homes may already be in summer routines. Local authorities may be repeating heat messages. But in May, the social system may still treat warmth as welcome. A hot night can be misunderstood as unusual comfort rather than physiological load. People may not yet be in the habit of checking on older neighbors. Workplaces may not yet have changed schedules. Families may not yet have discussed heat plans. The atmosphere entered summer mode. The routines had not fully followed. That is why the hidden number is central to preparedness. You can forecast a high daytime maximum and still miss the places where the night will trap heat. You can issue a heat alert and still have bedrooms that remain unsafe. You can tell people to stay cool and still have no cool room available. You can advise hydration and still have people whose medications, illness, mobility, or isolation make that advice hard to act on. You can warn a city and still have individual rooms where the warning cannot physically solve the problem. This is not just a heat wave, this is a nighttime recovery failure arriving before the system's summer clock. The phrase matters because it changes the unit of analysis. The unit is not only the hottest hour, the unit is the full daily cycle. The day loads the system, the night is supposed to unload it. If the night fails, the system begins the next day in deficit. That deficit can be biological, inside the body. It can be architectural, inside the building. It can be operational, inside a hospital or care network. It can be social, inside a household where no one knows who is most at risk. The danger is not only heat, it is heat repeated without recovery. Once you see that, the map changes. The reddest area is not the only place to watch. Watch the minimum temperature. Watch the apartments that stay hot after midnight. Watch the care homes where bedrooms are warmer than corridors. Watch the workers who sleep badly and return to outdoor jobs. Watch the hospitals after the second or third hot night. Watch the places where the forecast shows improvement, but the buildings have not cooled yet. The headline temperature tells you when people noticed. The hidden nighttime number tells you when the system started to lose margin. And that raises the next question. Why did the night fail to reset in the first place? Why did late spring heat stay in the air, the surfaces, the roofs, the streets, and the rooms after sunset? The answer begins above Western Europe, in the pressure pattern that held the heat in place. The mechanism begins in the atmosphere, but it does not end there. The mechanism begins above Western Europe, where the air stops moving the way people expect spring air to move. In ordinary language, people call it a heat dome. The phrase sounds simple, but the mechanism is not a dome made of glass. It is a pressure pattern. A large area of high pressure settles over a region and acts like a lid. Air under that high pressure sinks. As it sinks, it compresses and warms. Clouds become less likely. Rain becomes less likely. Wind can weaken. Sunlight reaches the ground for longer hours. The ground warms. Buildings warm. Roads warm. The air near the surface warms again. The heat does not just appear, it is assembled. According to Copernicus, the May heatwave formed under a persistent high-pressure pattern over Western Europe. That high pressure helped create long periods of sunshine and weak winds. It also helped draw very warm air northward from Morocco toward France, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and surrounding regions. The result was not only a hot day in one city, it was a large atmospheric arrangement capable of pushing late spring into a summer operating mode. That distinction matters. A hot day can be local. A heat dome is regional. A hot day can end when a front moves through. A heat dome can hold the pattern in place. A hot day can give the system one load. A heat dome can repeat the load day after day while recovery windows shrink. The mechanism begins above the land, then it moves down. The first step is sinking air. High pressure is associated with air descending through the atmosphere. When air descends, it is compressed by the weight of the air above it. Compressed air warms. This does not require a flame, it is physics. The air is being squeezed into lower levels of the atmosphere, and that compression raises its temperature. At the same time, sinking air makes it harder for clouds to form, because cloud formation needs rising air, cooling, and condensation. So the lid does two things at once. It warms the air, it clears the sky. A clearer sky lets more solar energy reach the surface. In late May, the sun over Western Europe is already strong. The days are long. There are many hours for roofs, roads, fields, brick walls, rail lines, playgrounds, and parking lots to absorb energy. Under a normal pattern, clouds, wind, showers, and cooler nights can interrupt that heating. Under persistent high pressure, the interruptions weaken. Each day adds heat to the surface. Each night removes less of it. This is how the event becomes cumulative. The second step is weak ventilation. Wind is one of the hidden cooling systems of everyday life. People notice wind when it is strong, but they often forget what light air movement does when the weather is hot. Wind can mix the lower atmosphere. It can move hot air away from surfaces. It can help sweat evaporate. It can bring in cooler air from a nearby region or from the sea. It can keep a city from feeling sealed. When high pressure weakens the flow, heat becomes more stagnant. The air near the ground is not replaced quickly enough. The warmth around buildings lingers. Streets that absorb the afternoon sun release heat into air that is not moving much. A bedroom window opens, but the air outside is not cool enough and not moving enough. The person inside feels the absence of wind as heaviness. The forecast may say the temperature is falling slowly, but the room does not feel released. The third step is imported heat. Copernicus described warm air moving northward from Morocco along the western side of the high-pressure system. That matters because a heat wave is not always created only by local sunshine. Sometimes, the atmosphere transports heat. A region can be warmed by air that has already been heated elsewhere. In this case, the source region added another layer to the event. Western Europe was not only being heated from above by clear skies, it was also receiving an air mass that had already carried warmth north. That is why the heat could arrive with such force. The pattern did not have to build slowly from mild spring conditions alone. It could move warmer air into place and then hold it there with high pressure. The atmosphere was not just turning up a thermostat, it was transporting heat, trapping heat, and repeating heat. The fourth step is surface storage. This is where the mechanism stops being abstract. Sunlight enters the ground, buildings and streets. Different surfaces respond differently. Grass and shaded soil can cool more effectively, especially if moisture is present. Asphalt and concrete store heat. Brick stores heat. Dark roofs store heat. Stone walls store heat. Rail tracks heat. Paved courtyards heat. Cars heat. Dense neighborhoods with little shade heat faster and release heat more slowly. The city becomes a battery. During the day, it charges. At night, it discharges. But if the night air remains warm, the battery does not fully empty. The heat stored in surfaces flows back into the lower air and into buildings. A wall that faced the afternoon sun can continue warming the room after sunset. A top-floor apartment can receive heat from the roof above. A narrow street can trap warmth between walls. A courtyard can lose air movement. A bus stop can remain hot because the pavement around it is still releasing heat. The thermometer may show the official air temperature. The surface tells another story. A person does not live in the official measurement. A person lives in a microclimate. On the shaded side of a street, the body may handle the heat one way. On sunlit pavement, it may handle it another. In a park with trees, there may be relief. On a platform with glass, metal, and no shade, there may be load. In a cooled office, the event may feel manageable. In an uncooled bedroom, the same regional heat wave may become a medical risk. This is how the mechanism becomes unequal. The fifth step is moisture and dryness. Heat interacts with water everywhere. In soil, water can absorb energy through evaporation. When soil is moist, some of the sun's energy goes into evaporating water, instead of only heating the surface. When soil dries, less energy is used for evaporation. Fields can heat differently depending on moisture. Parks can cool differently depending on irrigation, shade, and plant health. Rural areas can behave differently from urban areas, but rural heat can still become dangerous for workers, livestock, crops, and water demand. Dryness also changes the feel of the landscape. Vegetation can begin to stress earlier. Lawns and fields can lose their cooling effect. Dust can rise. Farm work can become more physically demanding. Irrigation demand can arrive sooner than expected. A heat wave in May does not land on an empty calendar. It lands on planting, growth, field maintenance, outdoor labor, school schedules, tourism, and early summer travel. The sixth step is the sea. This part is easy to miss because people imagine heat waves as land events, but the ocean and nearby seas help regulate coastal nights. Water warms and cools more slowly than land. In some patterns, a cooler sea breeze can help limit coastal heat, especially at night. But if nearby seas are unusually warm, that relief weakens. Copernicus noted marine heatwave conditions around the United Kingdom, Ireland, the Bay of Biscay, and the Western Mediterranean during the period. That does not mean the sea alone caused the heatwave. It means the background surface around parts of Western Europe was also unusually warm. A warm sea can feed warmer air into coastal zones and reduce the cooling that people expect after sunset. In a heat wave where nighttime recovery is already under pressure, that matters. The sea does not need to boil to matter. It only needs to be warm enough to reduce the nighttime reset. That is the seventh step. The daily cycle begins to fail. Under normal conditions, the day loads heat into the system and the night releases it. Under a heat dome, the release weakens. The sky may remain clear, but the air mass is warm. The wind may be weak. The surfaces may be loaded. The sea may not provide enough cooling. Buildings may have absorbed heat all day. The body may have worked for hours to stay stable. When night comes, the system is supposed to breathe out. Instead, it holds its breath. That is why this is not just a temperature event. It is a recovery event. The atmosphere creates the load. The surface stores the load. The building traps the load. The room transfers the load to the body. The body carries the load into the health system. Now follow the mechanism through one ordinary path. Above the city, high pressure holds the air in place. The sky stays bright. The wind is weak. Warm air has moved north. The afternoon sun strikes a row of brick apartment buildings. Roofs absorb heat. Upper walls absorb heat. Streets absorb heat. A top-floor room warms slowly through the day. Curtains may help, but not completely. The air outside reaches a level more typical of summer. The person inside feels the heat build before the official maximum is even reached. By evening, the outdoor temperature begins to fall. But the room does not fall with it. The wall is still warm. The roof space is still warm. The street outside is still releasing heat. The air through the window is still warm. The fan moves air across skin. But if the body is dehydrated, or if the room is too warm, or if the person is older, the relief is limited. Sweat has to evaporate to cool the body. If the air is still, if the person cannot drink enough, if medication changes water balance, if sleep is broken, the body keeps working. By midnight, the forecast may look less dramatic, but the body is still under load. By morning, the official event may seem to reset because a new day begins on the clock. The body does not reset just because the date changed. The room begins the morning warm. The person begins the morning tired. The city begins the morning with surfaces that did not fully cool. The hospital begins the day with patients who may have been struggling for many hours before anyone calls. The second afternoon then arrives on top of the first night. This is what repeated heat does. It erases the gap between events. From the atmosphere's perspective, it is one pattern. From the body's perspective, it is one continuous demand broken into days only by the clock. From the hospital's perspective, the consequences may lag. A person does not always collapse at the hottest hour. Heat illness can build. Dehydration can accumulate. Existing disease can worsen. Sleep loss can reduce judgment. Caregivers may notice problems later. Emergency departments may feel the signal after the meteorological peak. That lag is part of the mechanism. The weather happens first. The health burden follows. This is why official alerts are so important. They are not only warnings about the air, they are early translations from meteorology into operations. When a heat health alert is issued, it is an attempt to tell the care system that the atmospheric mechanism is now close enough to bodies to matter. Hospitals may need to prepare. Care homes may need to monitor residents. Local authorities may need to contact vulnerable people. Employers may need to adjust work. Families may need to check on relatives before the problem becomes visible. But alerts do not cool rooms by themselves. That is the gap. A forecast can name the mechanism. A health alert can identify the danger. A city can publish advice. but the heat still has to move through the real built environment, and the built environment is uneven. Some buildings shed heat, others trap it. Some neighborhoods have shade, others expose people to hard surfaces. Some people can leave a hot room, others cannot. Some have air conditioning, others have a fan, a window, and a hope that the night will finally change. The mechanism is physical, the damage is social as well. That does not mean the science is vague. It means the science becomes more important because it shows the path. The heat dome does not directly choose a hospital bed. It holds the weather pattern. The weather pattern heats the surface heats the building heats the room heats the body. The body, if it cannot recover, enters the health system. Every step is understandable, every step is measurable in some way, but the risk increases when no one sees the full chain. People often think of extreme weather as impact at the moment of contact. A storm hits a roof, a flood enters a street, a fire crosses a road. Heat is different. Heat can enter quietly. It can enter through a wall, through a window, through a work shift, through a night of broken sleep, through a medication schedule, through a room without cross-ventilation, through a care home corridor, through a bus stop without shade, through a farm field where the job cannot wait, through a hospital ward where patients are already fragile. By the time heat becomes visible as crisis, the system has already been carrying load. That is the lesson of the mechanism. The heat dome begins above Western Europe, but the risk is not suspended in the sky. It descends. It settles. It stores. It repeats. It moves from pressure to sunlight, from sunlight to surface, from surface to building, from building to room, from room to body, and from body to the systems that must respond. This is not just a heat wave. This is a nighttime recovery failure arriving before the system's summer clock. And once the mechanism reaches the body, the story can no longer stay on the map. The next clue is not in the atmosphere. It is inside one room, with one person, during one night that should have been a reset and instead becomes the beginning of the emergency. Imagine one room on the 4th floor of an older apartment building. The city outside has already been on the map for days. The air above it has been held under high pressure. The sun has pressed heat into brick, asphalt, glass, and roof tiles. The official station has recorded the number. The health alert has gone out. The public has heard the phrase early heat wave. But inside this room, none of that arrives as a phrase. It arrives as heat that will not leave. A woman in her late 70s lives there alone. We do not need her name to understand the pathway. She could be in London, Paris, Bordeaux, Cardiff, or another Western European city caught inside the same pattern. She has lived through hot days before. She knows summer. She knows how to close curtains in the afternoon and open the window at night. She has a small fan. She has a glass of water by the bed. She has medication in the kitchen. She does not think of herself as part of an emergency. That is how many heat emergencies begin. Not with panic, with normal routine meeting, abnormal conditions. During the afternoon, the room warms slowly. At first, it is only uncomfortable. The curtains are partly drawn. The window is closed against the hot air outside. The sun hits the building. The roof stores heat. The wall behind the bed stores heat. The pavement below stores heat. Each surface does what surfaces do. It absorbs energy. It waits. It releases that energy later. By evening, the official temperature begins to drop, but the room does not. This is the first failure in the pathway. The weather outside has started to move down from the peak, but the indoor environment is still rising or holding. To the person inside, the event no longer feels like a record at Kew Gardens or an anomaly over Western France. It feels like a room that has become slow, heavy, and hard to breathe in. The window opens. The air that enters is not cool. The fan switches on. It moves warmth from one side of the room to the other. The body does not experience climate change as a graph. It experiences it as a room that will not cool down. At this point, the mechanism has crossed from atmosphere into biology. Her body begins defending its internal temperature. Blood moves toward the skin. The heart works harder to move that blood. Sweat forms because evaporation can carry heat away, but sweating requires fluid. If she has not drunk enough, or if she avoids drinking because she does not want to get up at night, the cooling system loses strength. If she takes medication that affects fluid balance, blood pressure, kidney function, or the heart, the margin becomes smaller. None of this looks cinematic. It looks like a person sitting still in a chair. It looks like a hand on a glass. It looks like a decision to wait. That decision matters because heat turns small choices into load-bearing choices. Does she drink more water? Does she call her daughter? Does she go downstairs? Does she open the door to the corridor? Does she believe the alert applies to her? Does she think the room will cool soon? Does she recognize dizziness as danger or as ordinary tiredness? Does someone else know to check on her before morning? The public alert exists outside the room. The question is whether it reaches the behavior inside the room. By midnight, sleep becomes difficult. The body is supposed to cool slightly during sleep. The heart rate should ease. The muscles should rest. The brain should cycle through recovery. But warm air interrupts that process. She turns over. She removes a blanket. She drinks some water. She gets up, then sits back down because standing too quickly feels strange. The fan is still on. The room is still warm. The window is open. But the outdoor air has not dropped enough to reset the space. This is not only discomfort, it is a physiological negotiation. The body is trying to stay stable against an environment that is no longer giving it relief. In a younger, healthier person, the same night might mean poor sleep and irritation. In an older person, it can mean something more serious. Heat can worsen strain on the heart. Dehydration can affect the kidneys. Sleep loss can affect balance and judgment. Confusion can make it harder to follow advice. A person may forget medication, take medication without enough water, or misread the seriousness of symptoms. The body is not a perfect alarm system. It can be in danger before it understands danger. This is why nighttime heat is so deceptive. During the day, people expect to protect themselves. They look for shade. They avoid the sun if they can. They may hear warnings on the radio or see alerts on a phone. At night, they expect safety to come automatically. They expect darkness to mean cooling. They expect sleep to repair what the day stressed. But under this pattern, darkness does not perform the old function. The night comes, and the load remains. The event outside is visible. The damage pathway inside is quiet. By early morning, she may not call anyone. She may simply feel exhausted. That matters because a heat wave often creates delayed effects. The hottest moment may be yesterday afternoon, but the medical signal can appear later. A body under stress for one night can become a body in trouble the next day. A person who slept badly may be less able to make good decisions. She may go out too late in the morning. She may stand in a queue. She may take a bus. She may try to buy groceries or collect medicine because life continues even when weather becomes dangerous. Heat does not stop ordinary obligations. It makes ordinary obligations heavier. Now the pathway leaves the room. If she becomes dizzy and falls, the heat has entered the emergency system. If she becomes confused and a neighbor notices, the heat has entered the care network. If she calls a family member, the heat has entered a household response. If an ambulance is called, the heat has entered dispatch, staffing, transport, triage, and hospital capacity. If she arrives at an emergency department, the event is no longer only meteorological, it is now clinical. That is the conversion. Atmospheric pressure becomes medical workload. This conversion does not require every exposed person to become critically ill. It only requires enough vulnerable people to cross thresholds at the same time. Public health systems are built around numbers, but those numbers are made of individual rooms. One room becomes one call becomes one ambulance trip becomes one hospital arrival. Many rooms across a city can become a pattern before the public fully understands what happened. This is why the Amber Health Alert matters. When a health agency warns that heat may affect the whole health and social care system, it is not describing an abstract risk. It is anticipating this chain. It is anticipating people whose bodies cannot cool. Care homes where staff need to check residents more often. Hospitals where fragile patients are already vulnerable. Community services where workers must decide whom to visit first. Ambulance systems where response times can be affected if demand rises. Local authorities where cooling spaces and outreach become operational questions. But the alert cannot enter every room by itself. Someone has to act on it. That is where social structure enters the pathway. If the woman has a family member nearby, someone may call before the night becomes dangerous. If she has a neighbor who knows her routine, someone may knock. If her building has a cool common space, she may leave the apartment for a few hours. If her doctor or local authority has a heat risk list, she may receive advice. If she has money for cooling, the room may stay safer. If the building has shade, ventilation, and insulation designed for heat as well as cold, the load may be lower. But if she lives alone, if the building traps heat, if she cannot easily leave, if she distrusts the warning, if she worries about electricity cost, if no one checks, then the same atmospheric event takes a different path. Risk follows connection. It follows housing. It follows money. It follows mobility. It follows where the warning becomes action. This is why saying people are affected is not enough. The mechanism does not hit a generic person. It travels through specific conditions. A hot night in a cooled home is one event. A hot night in a top-floor flat is another. A hot night for someone healthy is one event. A hot night for someone with heart disease is another. A hot night for someone with family nearby is one event. A hot night for someone isolated is another. The weather may be regional. The exposure is local. Now look at the same pathway through a worker, a delivery driver, a road maintenance worker, a farm worker, a caregiver moving between homes, or a hospital cleaner may also begin the day with poor sleep. The room was hot. The night did not reset the body. But the shift starts anyway. Heat enters the route. It enters the uniform. It enters the vehicle. It enters the pavement. It enters the brake schedule. It enters the question of whether a person can stop without losing pay, time, or responsibility. The body carries the night into the job. That is a different kind of infrastructure stress. It is not a broken rail or a failed transformer. It is human capacity being reduced before the workday begins. A tired worker is more vulnerable to heat. A dehydrated worker may make slower decisions. A caregiver who slept badly still has to help someone else. A hospital worker under heat stress still has to serve patients. A bus driver, train staff member, warehouse worker, or outdoor crew member may become part of the system load while also being exposed to it. The mechanism moves through labor, then it moves through service. If enough workers are tired, sick, delayed, or overheated, the system loses margin. The hospital may still be open. The road network may still function. The care visits may still happen, but everything becomes thinner. More effort is required to produce the same service. The heat wave does not need to shut the system down to matter. It only needs to reduce spare capacity while demand rises. That is the hidden pathway. Demand goes up, capacity goes down, and the same night can do both. For the older woman in the apartment, the hot night increases personal risk. For the caregiver scheduled to visit her, the hot night may also reduce stamina. For the ambulance crew, the hot day may increase calls. For the hospital, the heat may add patients while staff are working in buildings that also have to manage temperature. For the power system, cooling demand may rise as households and institutions try to protect people. For the city, public spaces may fill as residents search for relief. The body is the meeting point. Atmospheric heat enters the body, and the body sends signals back into the system. A phone call, a missed shift, a fall, a hospital admission, a care visit, a higher electricity bill, a family decision, a public health statistic. This is why the human pathway cannot be separated from the infrastructure pathway. They are the same story viewed from different distances. From far away, the heat wave is a colored anomaly over Western Europe. From closer in, it is a record temperature. Closer still, it is an overnight minimum that refuses to fall. Closer still, it is one room. Closer still, it is one body deciding whether to drink, call, sleep, stand, work, or wait. The danger is not only outside, it is outside becoming inside. And once it is inside, it can move outward again through the systems that must respond. By the next afternoon, the woman may be safe because someone called, because she drank water, because the room cooled slightly, because a neighbor helped, because a care worker arrived, or because the heat eased. That outcome matters. Preparedness works when the pathway is interrupted early. A phone call can be infrastructure. A shaded room can be infrastructure. A cool lobby can be infrastructure. A changed shift time can be infrastructure. A nurse checking a resident twice instead of once can be infrastructure. But if none of those interruptions happen, the pathway continues. From atmosphere to roof, from roof to room to body, from body to emergency call, from emergency call to hospital, from hospital to the wider system. This is the part of heat that is easiest to underestimate. It does not always announce itself as destruction. It advances through weakness, fatigue, isolation, and delay. It finds the place where recovery was supposed to happen and asks whether that place can still perform its job. The next weak point is smaller than most people think. It is not the whole city, it is the bedroom. The weak point is not the whole city. The weak point is the room where recovery is supposed to happen. That sounds too small for a continental heat wave. It sounds too ordinary. A bedroom is not a power station. It is not a hospital. It is not a railway line, a reservoir, a bridge, or a storm drain. It has no control room. It has no public warning light. It does not appear on a national risk map. Most of the time, it is private space, invisible to the agencies watching the event from above. But in a heat wave built around nighttime recovery failure, the bedroom becomes infrastructure. It is the place where the body is supposed to unload heat. It is the place where the heart is supposed to slow. It is the place where sleep is supposed to restore judgment, balance, hydration behavior, memory, and strength. It is the place where a person becomes ready for the next day. If that room cannot cool, the system loses its smallest recovery unit. That is the weak point. Not the whole health system, not the whole housing stock, not the whole city, the uncooled urban bedroom. To see why, look at how that room normally works. In a mild climate, especially across parts of Western Europe, many homes have historically been designed around keeping warmth inside. Thick walls, compact layouts, smaller windows in older buildings, limited mechanical cooling, and insulation patterns shaped by winter all make sense in a climate where cold has long been the central household threat. For much of the year, heat retention is a feature. A room that stays warm overnight can protect a person from cold, reduce heating demand, and make a building more efficient. But under early extreme heat, the same feature can reverse. A wall that holds warmth in winter can hold heat during a May heat wave. A top floor that feels pleasant in spring can become the hottest part of the building. A window that brings light can become an afternoon heat collector. A roof that protects from rain can become a slow heat source above the bed. A small room with poor airflow can become a thermal trap. The building has not changed, the load has. That is the first rule of infrastructure failure. A component does not have to be badly built to become vulnerable. It only has to be asked to perform under conditions it was not designed for, at a time when the surrounding system is not ready to support it. The uncooled bedroom may function perfectly in April. It may function well in ordinary May warmth. It may even be comfortable during short hot spells if nights cool properly. But when the daytime peak is high and the overnight minimum stays elevated, the bedroom is no longer simply shelter. It becomes a storage device for heat. During the afternoon, sun enters the system. It strikes the roof. It strikes brick. It strikes concrete. It strikes road surfaces. It strikes balconies, window frames, and walls. The outside air rises. Inside the building, heat moves slowly through materials. A person may close curtains, but the wall continues to absorb. A person may avoid cooking, but the room still warms. A person may open a window later, but the outside air may not be cool enough to flush the heat out. By evening, the official outdoor number may fall. The weak room does not follow quickly. That lag is critical. It means the body can be trapped inside yesterday's weather. A well-cooled room interrupts the pathway. It allows sleep. It allows the body to reduce strain. It turns a dangerous day into a recoverable day. An uncooled bedroom does the opposite. It extends the heat wave beyond sunset. It removes the line between day and night. It turns the overnight hours into another exposure period. This is why the bedroom is not just a domestic detail. It is a health system input. When a person cannot sleep, the next day changes. Concentration drops. Reaction time worsens. Mood changes. A person may forget water, misjudge symptoms, or delay calling for help. An older person may stand up too quickly after a restless night. A worker may start a shift already dehydrated. A caregiver may be less alert while caring for someone else. A patient with heart disease may carry extra strain into the morning. A person with kidney disease may have less margin. A person taking medication may become more vulnerable to heat stress. The room sends people into the day with less reserve. That loss of reserve is invisible on the weather map. The map shows air temperature. The room determines recovery. That is the difference between exposure and vulnerability. Two people can live under the same heat alert and face different risks because one has a cool bedroom and the other does not. One can close shutters, run air conditioning, and sleep. Another has a fan pushing warm air around a top-floor flat. One has a shaded street, a cross breeze, and someone to call. Another has a sun-facing wall, no lift, no nearby family, and a fear of the electricity bill. The forecast is shared. The protection is not. That is why this weak point is social as well as physical. A bedroom can fail because of building design. It can fail because of poverty. It can fail because the tenant cannot install cooling. It can fail because the electricity cost feels dangerous. It can fail because the resident is too frail to move to a cooler place. It can fail because there is no safe public cooling center nearby. It can fail because the person does not know the alert applies to them. It can fail because everyone around them also thinks May heat is still a pleasant surprise. The room may be private. The failure is collective. Now, follow the chain. The room stays hot overnight. The person sleeps badly. The body does not recover. The next day begins with fatigue. The person drinks too little. Symptoms build. A family member is not called. A neighbor does not know. The person falls, becomes confused, or struggles to breathe. A call goes to emergency services. An ambulance is dispatched. A hospital receives another patient. A public health system records another heat-related signal. Nothing in that chain begins at the hospital. It begins in the bedroom. This is the part that preparedness often struggles to reach. Public agencies can issue warnings. Meteorological services can identify the heat wave. Health agencies can activate alerts. Local authorities can send messages. Newsrooms can repeat advice. But the final test happens behind a closed door, in a room where the temperature may be higher than the official outdoor reading, and where the person inside may have limited power to change it. The warning can be correct and still not be enough. Because the warning does not cool the room, this is the infrastructure gap. It is not that forecasts fail to see the heat. In this event, agencies saw it. Copernicus identified the anomaly. National weather offices recorded the peaks. Health agencies issued alerts. The problem is what happens after detection. Detection must become protection. Protection must reach buildings. Buildings must reach rooms. Rooms must reach bodies. If the chain stops at public messaging, the most vulnerable exposure points remain physically unchanged. Advice matters. But advice is not insulation, shade, ventilation, air conditioning, staffing, transport, money, or a neighbor knocking on the door. The weak point is where advice meets material reality. Tell someone to stay cool. But where? Tell someone to avoid the hottest hours. But what if the bedroom is still hot at midnight? Tell someone to drink water. But what if they are frail, confused, or avoiding trips to the bathroom? Tell someone to check on older relatives. But what if the person is socially isolated? Tell someone to use a fan. But what if the air in the room is already too warm and still? Tell someone to go to a cooler place. But what if they cannot travel, or do not know where that place is, or fear leaving home? Heat preparedness is only as strong as the route between the alert and the room. That route is uneven. In some neighborhoods, trees reduce surface heat. In others, hard surfaces dominate. In some buildings, shutters and ventilation help. In others, windows face west, roofs are poorly protected, and corridors trap warmth. In some households, air conditioning is available. In others, it is absent, unaffordable, or culturally uncommon. In some families, people call each other during heat. In others, isolation turns exposure into a private event. This is why early heat is especially dangerous. The room may not yet be in summer mode. A fan may still be stored away. A cooling center may not yet be widely known. A care plan may not yet be activated. A building manager may not yet be watching indoor temperatures. A school may not yet be adjusting hours. A care home may not yet be operating at peak heat vigilance. A resident may not yet believe the first hot night of the season can be medically serious. The calendar says late spring, the room says summer. The body obeys the room. That is the operational failure. The system may have a heat plan, but the bedroom does not read the plan. The bedroom responds to shade, airflow, wall temperature, roof temperature, external air, internal heat, appliances, occupancy, and the ability of the person inside to intervene. It is a small physical system with its own limits. Once those limits are crossed, the room becomes part of the hazard. Now place that small system inside a city. One hot bedroom is a personal problem. Thousands of hot bedrooms are a public health event. That is how scale appears. It does not begin as one giant failure. It begins as many small rooms failing the same task on the same night. Each room is separate. Each person is separate. Each decision is separate. But the atmospheric pattern links them. The heat dome creates a common load. The city stores it. The night fails to clear it. The housing stock distributes it unevenly. The health system receives the result. From above, it looks like weather. From inside, it is a network of rooms. This network includes care homes, A care home is not only a medical or social institution, it is a collection of rooms where residents may have limited ability to regulate their own exposure. Staff can monitor hydration, curtains, windows, fans, and symptoms, but staffing itself can be under pressure. If bedrooms remain hot, vulnerable bodies carry load through the night. A cooled lounge helps, but people still need safe sleep. The weak point can be the individual room, not the building's front door. It includes hospitals. Hospitals are often treated as places that receive heat victims, but hospitals are also exposed buildings. Wards, waiting areas, staff rooms, kitchens, laundry areas, mechanical rooms, and older wings can all face heat management challenges. Patients may already have limited physical margin. Staff may be working through difficult conditions. Cooling is not only comfort in a hospital, it is part of clinical safety. It includes rental housing. Renters may have less control over buildings than owners. They may be unable to add external shading, change windows, install cooling, improve ventilation, or modify roofs. They may hesitate to complain. They may avoid energy use. They may live in smaller spaces with fewer options for moving to a cooler room. The heat wave enters through the building, but the power to change the building sits elsewhere. It includes low-income households. Heat protection costs money, not only for air conditioning, but for electricity, transport, water, time off work, fans, window coverings, and the ability to leave an unsafe space. People with fewer resources may experience heat as a sequence of trade-offs. Cool the room or save on the bill. Stay home or lose wages. Buy equipment or buy food. Leave the window open or worry about safety. Use the fan or worry it will not help enough. It includes people who work nights. For them, the bedroom is supposed to function during the day, when the heat is worse. A nighttime recovery failure becomes a daytime recovery failure. The room that is too hot at midnight may be unbearable at noon. A person trying to sleep after a night shift may face the highest indoor heat precisely when recovery is most needed. The public advice to stay indoors during the hottest hours can fail if indoors is the hottest place available. This is the cruel inversion of heat risk. Shelter can become exposure. The same apartment that protects from cold, rain, and wind can trap heat. The same bedroom that should restore the body can drain it. The same instruction to go home and stay safe can place a person inside the weakest part of the system. The danger is not only outside on the street, it is the failure of the indoor environment to perform the job that safety depends on. That failure does not need to be total. It only needs to remove enough recovery from enough people. Systems rarely collapse only because one big component breaks. They often become dangerous when many small margins shrink at once. A slightly warmer bedroom, a slightly worse night of sleep, a slightly more dehydrated worker, a slightly busier emergency department, a slightly higher cooling demand, a slightly slower care visit, a slightly more isolated resident. Each margin looks manageable alone. Together, they create a system with less room to absorb the next load. That is what this May heatwave exposed. Europe was not only facing heat, it was facing heat arriving early enough to test whether the smallest recovery spaces were ready. The answer was uneven. Some rooms cooled, some people recovered, some warnings worked, some families checked, some care systems responded. Preparedness is real, and it can save lives. But the warning from the event is that readiness cannot be judged only by whether an alert exists. It has to be judged by whether the alert reaches the room, changes the room, or moves the person before the body loses margin. The weak point is not the whole system. The weak point is the room where the system expects recovery to happen without seeing whether recovery is actually possible. And history has already shown what happens when that assumption fails. Not because every heatwave repeats the past, and not because one record guarantees disaster, but because Europe has already seen how heat can move through isolation, housing, nighttime stress, and delayed response. The precedent is not a prophecy. It is evidence left behind by the same mechanism. This is not speculation. A version of this mechanism has already left evidence behind. The most important precedent is the European heatwave of 2003. It is still one of the clearest examples of how heat becomes disaster, not only through the maximum temperature, but through duration, nighttime stress, isolation, housing, delayed response, and the failure of ordinary systems to recognize that heat has become a medical event. The 2003 heatwave did not hit Europe as a single dramatic impact. It arrived as days of extreme heat, repeated across countries that were not equally prepared for the load. France became the most visible case, but the event affected a wider European region. Researchers later estimated more than 70,000 excess deaths across Europe during that summer. In France alone, official reviews found roughly 15,000 excess deaths linked to the heat. Those numbers are not used here to claim that May 2026 is the same event. They are used to prove that the pathway is real. Heat can kill without breaking buildings. It can kill without floodwater. It can kill without wind damage. It can kill by preventing the body from recovering. That is the connection. In 2003, many deaths occurred among older people, especially those living alone, socially isolated, or in overheated urban environments. The heat did not need to choose them one by one. The built environment, social isolation, age, illness, and delayed public recognition did part of the selection. A hot room became a medical risk. A missing phone call became a vulnerability. A closed apartment became an exposure chamber. A city that looked functional from the street could still contain thousands of private emergencies behind doors. That is the lesson the current heatwave forces back into view. The official number may be outside. The fatal pathway can be inside. In France in 2003, the heatwave struck during August, when many people were away on holiday. Medical staffing and social networks were disrupted, and some older residents were left with less daily contact. That context mattered. It was not only the temperature, it was temperature arriving inside a social calendar. Doctors, families, care services, and local systems did not all read the event quickly enough as a public health emergency. The result was not simply hot weather, it was hot weather moving through a gap in recognition. The calendar mattered then, it matters now. But the calendar problem has changed. In 2003, the danger came during the high summer period, when Europe could still fail to recognize heat as a mass casualty risk. In the May heatwave, the danger is different. The warning is not that the same August disaster is repeating in the same way. The warning is that heat is arriving before many systems have fully shifted into summer readiness. The old failure was partly a failure to recognize heat as a deadly hazard. The new failure may be a failure to recognize how early the hazard can now arrive. This is why historical precedent should not be used carelessly. History is not a script. It is evidence of mechanism. The mechanism in 2003 was not one magic number on a thermometer. It was persistent heat, warm nights, buildings that trapped heat, older bodies with limited reserve, social isolation, health services that saw the signal only after bodies had already been carrying load, cities that intensified exposure, public systems that learned too late that heat can create emergency demand without visible destruction. That mechanism is the bridge to the present, not the exact date, not the exact geography, not the exact death toll. The mechanism. Persistent heat reduces recovery. Nighttime warmth weakens the body's reset. Urban surfaces store and release heat. Housing determines exposure. Isolation determines whether symptoms are noticed. Health systems receive the consequences after the meteorological peak. And preparedness depends on whether warnings move fast enough from national alert to local action to individual rooms. That chain was visible in 2003. It is visible again now, even if the outcome is not the same. Europe did learn after 2003. That must be said clearly. Heat health warning systems improved. Public health agencies developed alert levels. Cities created heat plans. Care homes became more aware of heat risk. Families and local authorities learned that older people living alone need attention during extreme heat. Weather offices communicate heat risk more directly than they once did. Climate services can now track anomalies, pressure patterns, soil moisture, marine heat waves, and heat stress with far more precision. Preparedness is better than it was, but better is not the same as complete. The 2003 disaster revealed one type of unpreparedness. It showed what happens when societies underestimate heat as a direct public health threat. The May heatwave reveals a newer question. What happens when a society has heat plans, but the heat arrives earlier than the plan feels real to the public? What happens when alerts exist, but households still treat the first severe heat of the season as welcome sunshine? What happens when meteorological summer has not begun, but the atmosphere is already delivering summer-level load? That is the comparison. 2003 showed the danger of not believing heat could kill. The May event shows the danger of believing the calendar still tells heat when to begin. There is another lesson from the past. Heat deaths often follow a lag. The body may struggle for hours or days before the health system sees the full signal. An older person may not call during the hottest afternoon. A neighbor may not notice until morning. A hospital may see increased strain after the worst heat has already passed. Public attention can move on because the forecast improves, while indoor spaces and vulnerable bodies are still recovering from the accumulated load. This lag makes heat politically and emotionally difficult. A flood is visible when the water enters the street. A storm is visible when trees fall. A wildfire is visible when smoke darkens the sky. Heat can look like ordinary summer until the records are counted later. That is why evidence from the past matters. It gives shape to an invisible hazard. It shows that a city can appear to function while mortality rises. It shows that private rooms can become the hidden geography of disaster. It shows that hospitals can receive consequences from exposures that began far from any medical setting. It shows that deaths can be distributed across apartments, care homes, and neighborhoods rather than concentrated at one dramatic impact site. The precedent does not tell us that every early heatwave will become 2003. It tells us what to watch before the numbers become final. Watch the nights, watch the old housing, watch people living alone, watch care homes. Watch emergency calls after repeated warm nights. Watch the gap between public warnings and physical cooling. Watch whether the first severe heat of the season is treated as a warning or a celebration. That last point is crucial. A summer heat wave can arrive into a society already thinking about heat. An early heat wave arrives into anticipation of pleasant weather. People want to go outside, parks and beaches fill, windows open. Outdoor work continues. Alcohol, travel, sport, tourism, and long days in the sun can increase exposure. The season invites people into the hazard before the system fully names it as hazard. 2003 showed that social timing matters. May 2026 shows that atmospheric timing is changing. The difference is important. In 2003, Europe was shocked into recognizing heat as a mass public health risk. In the years after, countries built warning systems and heat action plans. That is progress. But climate risk does not freeze after a system adapts once. The hazard keeps moving. The next weakness may not be the absence of warnings. It may be warning fatigue, early season disbelief, uneven housing, social isolation, energy cost, care system strain, or the fact that many buildings still cannot deliver cool sleep during a hot night. The past does not accuse the present of doing nothing. It asks whether the present has adapted to the right version of the hazard. That is the real use of precedent, not fear, diagnosis. The 2003 heatwave proved that heat can travel through the quiet parts of society, through apartments, through night hours, through people not checked, through health systems that respond after exposure has already happened, through urban environments that store heat, through calendars that reduce contact and staffing, through the assumption that weather is not a disaster unless it breaks something visible. The May heatwave brings the same diagnostic lens to a different moment. The visible record was in late spring. The hidden risk was overnight recovery. The weak point was the uncooled room. The system question was preparedness arriving late. That does not mean the outcome must match the past. In fact, the purpose of memory is to prevent exact repetition. A society that remembers 2003 can issue earlier alerts, call vulnerable residents sooner, monitor care homes more aggressively, open cooling spaces faster, adjust work hours earlier, and treat the first severe heat of the season as a real health event. History is useful only if it changes action before the count is over, but there is one lesson Europe has not fully absorbed. Heat preparedness cannot be seasonal in the old sense. It cannot wait for the period when heat used to be expected. It cannot depend entirely on the public feeling that summer has started. It cannot assume that the first dangerous nights will arrive only after routines, staffing, school policies, workplace habits, and household behavior have adjusted. The atmosphere does not read the preparedness calendar. It reads pressure, radiation, air masses, soil, sea surface temperatures, and the background climate. This is where the precedent becomes uncomfortable. 2003 showed a system surprised by the lethality of heat. The new pattern suggests systems may now be surprised by the timing of heat. Those are different failures, but they can meet in the same room. An older person alone in an apartment does not care whether the institutional failure is old or new. The body only knows whether the room cools. The body only knows whether the night releases the heat. The body only knows whether someone checks, whether water is nearby, whether help comes early, and whether the next day begins with enough strength to endure another load. This is not just a heat wave. This is a nighttime recovery failure, arriving before the system's summer clock. The precedent proves the mechanism can harm real people. The present event shows the mechanism arriving earlier. The next step is to widen the frame, because if the problem is not only one heat wave, but a calendar mismatch between climate, infrastructure, and public health, then Europe is not facing an isolated weather story. It is facing a new operating pattern. The May heat wave is not only a heat wave, it is a calendar failure. That is the larger pattern. A heat wave is the visible event. A calendar failure is the system problem underneath it. The atmosphere moves into summer mode before the institutions, buildings, workplaces, schools, care homes, households, and public habits have moved with it. The hazard is not simply that temperatures rise. The hazard is that temperatures rise on a timetable the system does not fully believe yet. This is how a weather event becomes a system signal. The old calendar says heat preparedness should intensify as summer begins. The new signal says dangerous heat can arrive before the social machinery has completed that shift. The old calendar says late May is a transition period. The atmosphere says transition periods can now carry summer-level load. The old calendar says the main heat season is ahead. The body says the load is already here. This is not just a heat wave. This is a calendar failure written through the body at night. The phrase sounds abstract until it is placed inside operations. A health agency can have a heat warning system, but if the first severe heat arrives before the public is mentally in heat season, the warning has to overcome disbelief. A hospital can have a summer plan, but if staffing, maintenance, patient flow, and building cooling assumptions are still arranged around late spring, the first heat wave becomes a live test. A school can know heat is a risk, but if classroom routines, shade access, water breaks, and communication are not yet active, students and staff become part of the experiment. A care home can have guidance, but guidance has to become practice. Windows have to be managed. Curtains have to be closed at the right time. Residents have to be checked. Drinks have to be offered. Symptoms have to be recognized. Rooms have to be monitored. Staff have to know which residents are most at risk. Families have to understand that the danger is not only in August. If the first severe heat arrives in May, the care system has less time to move from paper readiness to physical readiness. That is the pattern. The climate moves first. The system catches up afterward. But catching up is dangerous when the load is already on the body. According to Copernicus, Europe has been warming faster than any other continent, with temperatures rising by about 0.56 degrees Celsius per decade since the mid-1990s. That number is not just background science, it is the operating environment. A warmer Europe does not only mean that future summers may be hotter, it means thresholds can be crossed earlier, later, and more often than the institutions built around the old seasonal rhythm expect. The baseline is shifting. And when the baseline shifts, calendars become outdated infrastructure. That is a hard idea because calendars feel neutral. June, July, August. School terms, holiday seasons, staffing patterns, maintenance schedules, public messaging campaigns, agricultural windows, rail repair windows, public pool schedules, lifeguard staffing, outdoor work routines, electricity demand planning, care home heat protocols. City life is organized around assumptions about when conditions usually happen. But climate risk does not only change averages, it changes timing. A heat wave that once belonged mainly to high summer can appear in late spring. A warm night that once seemed rare can arrive before people have installed fans. A health alert can be issued before the public has stopped thinking of sun as good news. A railway line can face thermal stress before summer disruption plans feel urgent. A farmer can see water demand rise before the season's full irrigation assumptions have shifted. A city can need shade, water, cooling, staffing, and outreach before the political calendar has caught up. This is why the May event matters beyond the record. The record tells us what happened at a thermometer. The calendar failure tells us what happened to preparedness. In the United Kingdom, the heat health alert system has a core season running from the 1st of June to the 30th of September, while officials can issue extraordinary alerts outside that period when needed. That detail matters because it shows the system is aware that heat can arrive outside the core window. But it also reveals the tension. The formal season has boundaries, the atmosphere does not. The system can stretch, but every stretch tests whether people, buildings, services, and local decision-makers are ready to act before the familiar season begins. An extraordinary alert is not only a warning, it is evidence that the calendar was exceeded. That does not mean the warning system failed. In fact, issuing an alert before the core season is a sign that surveillance is working. The failure lies deeper. It lies in the gap between detection and protection. The agency can detect the heat, the warning can be issued, but the built environment may still trap warmth. The household may still lack cooling. The care home may still be adjusting. The worker may still be on an ordinary shift. The school may still be treating hot classrooms as unusual rather than operational. The public may still be interpreting the day through the emotional lens of spring. Preparedness is not proven by the existence of an alert. Preparedness is proven by what changes after the alert. Do shifts change? Do care visits change? Do classrooms change? Do bedrooms cool? Do hospitals prepare? Do neighbors call? Do employers adjust? Do cooling spaces open? Do public messages reach people who are not watching weather news? Do tenants have a real option besides enduring the room? The answer will not be the same everywhere. That is another part of the system pattern. Heat risk is distributed through inequality. A national record is shared information, but protection is local. A wealthy household may turn on cooling. A renter may open a window into warm air. A shaded neighborhood may cool overnight. A dense block of hard surfaces may hold heat. A healthy office worker may treat the event as unpleasant. A frail person in an uncooled room may be pushed toward crisis. A city may have a heat plan, but the plan does not reach every building with equal force. Climate change loads the system. Inequality decides where the load lands hardest. Infrastructure decides how long the load remains. That combination is the real pattern. Heat does not strike like a hammer. It presses. It presses on housing, health, labor, energy, water, transport, and care at the same time. A hospital may be managing heat-related patients while also cooling its own wards. A power grid may be managing early cooling demand, while maintenance schedules are still arranged around older assumptions. A water system may face higher demand from households, parks, work sites, and cooling needs. Public transport may carry passengers through exposed platforms and overheated vehicles. Agricultural systems may see plant stress, evaporation, and irrigation demand earlier than planned. Each system can handle some stress alone. Compound stress is different. The hospital can handle patients. But what if staff also slept badly? The grid can handle demand. But what if cooling demand rises early, while other operations are scheduled differently? A city can open cooling centers. But what if public awareness is low because the heat arrives before summer? A care home can monitor residents. But what if the building itself does not cool at night? A worker can follow heat advice. But what if the job cannot stop and the home did not provide recovery? The event is not only heat, it is heat interacting with schedules. That is why the concept of a new baseline matters. A new baseline is not just a hotter average. It is a changed range of what must be considered normal for planning. If late May can deliver temperatures and health risks once associated with deeper summer, then preparedness must begin earlier. If nights can remain unusually warm before summer routines begin, then public health plans must treat nighttime recovery as a core metric. If marine heat waves around nearby seas can reduce coastal cooling, then coastal communities cannot assume the sea will always provide relief. If high-pressure patterns can hold heat over large regions, then local plans must consider regional demand and limited escape. The old baseline asked whether the event was unusual. The new baseline asks whether the system is built for the timing of unusual events. That is a different question. It changes what counts as readiness. A city is not ready for heat only because it knows the forecast. It is ready when its housing, alerts, outreach, public spaces, health services, work rules, transport systems, and emergency response can operate under heat that arrives early, lasts through the night, and affects many neighborhoods at once. A hospital is not ready only because it has a plan. It is ready when the plan can be activated before the first patient surge. A household is not ready only because it has heard advice. It is ready when there is a physical way to cool the person at risk. Readiness is physical. Readiness is social. Readiness is timed. Timing may be the part Europe is being forced to relearn. For decades, many temperate countries treated heat as episodic. A short hot spell, a summer inconvenience, a period for beach crowds and warnings to drink water. That perception is changing, but the built environment changes slowly. Housing stock lasts decades. Urban tree cover takes years. Rail systems are expensive to adapt. Hospitals are complex to retrofit. Care systems are already strained. Energy poverty does not disappear because a heat alert is issued. Public trust and public behavior do not shift instantly. The atmosphere can change faster than infrastructure. That is the mismatch. The May heatwave exposed that mismatch because it arrived at the edge of expectation. In high summer, the heat may still overwhelm systems, but at least the season gives psychological permission to act. In late spring, action can feel premature. People may hesitate. Agencies may communicate carefully. Households may improvise. Employers may not yet see the need to change. The first severe heat of the year becomes a test not only of physical resilience, but of whether warnings can overcome the emotional momentum of the calendar. That emotional momentum is powerful. People want spring warmth. They want sun after cold months. They want parks, travel, outdoor meals, and open windows. They want the first heat to mean relief. But the body does not care whether the heat feels welcome. It responds to thermal load. The heart, kidneys, skin, brain, and sleep system do not negotiate with the season. If the room stays too warm, the body carries the cost. If the night does not cool, recovery fails. If recovery fails across enough rooms, the health system sees the pattern later. This is how pleasant weather becomes public risk. Not because sunshine is bad, because intensity, timing, duration, and vulnerability have aligned. A heat wave in May also changes risk communication. Authorities must warn without sounding exaggerated. They must tell people that the first severe heat can be dangerous, without turning every warm day into an emergency. They must explain that the problem is not only the maximum temperature, but the overnight minimum. They must reach tourists, outdoor workers, older residents, families, tenants, care homes, schools, and people who do not identify as vulnerable. They must make heat visible before bodies reveal the damage. That is difficult. A warning about heat competes with the lived feeling of good weather. A warning about nighttime recovery competes with a culture that measures danger by afternoon highs. A warning about early season preparedness competes with the assumption that summer risk begins when summer officially begins. This is why the evidence has to be operational. It cannot only say climate change is making heat worse. That is true as a broad pattern, but it is not specific enough for action. The operational question is what changes tomorrow. Do local authorities start heat outreach earlier? Do care homes monitor indoor temperatures before June? Do schools create shade and water protocols for spring heat? Do employers adjust outdoor work when heat arrives early? Do housing policies treat cooling as health protection, not luxury? Do public health systems track warm nights as seriously as hot afternoons? The future will be shaped by those details, not only by global temperature curves. The curve matters because it sets the background, but the harm is produced through pathways. A pressure pattern, a warm air mass, a hot afternoon, a warm night, a room that does not cool, a person who does not recover, a system that receives demand, a calendar that was late. That is the model. And once you see the model, the question shifts from one event to the next sequence. What happens if the next early heat wave lasts longer? What happens if it follows a dry spring? What happens if it coincides with exams, school trips, rail maintenance, energy outages, care staffing shortages, or a major public event? What happens if it arrives in a city where housing is older, poorer, denser, and less shaded? What happens if the first severe heat of the season is also the first time vulnerable people realize their rooms no longer cool at night? These are not predictions of catastrophe. They are system questions. A good system asks them before the emergency count is complete. A weak system asks them afterward. This May heatwave is an early warning because it shows where the old assumptions are thin. It shows that the season can be pulled forward. It shows that nighttime heat can turn comfort into recovery failure. It shows that warnings can activate before the public has psychologically entered summer. It shows that preparedness is not one document, but a chain that has to reach the bedroom. It shows that climate risk is not only a future condition, but a present timing problem. The future will not arrive only as higher numbers. It will arrive as old schedules becoming unreliable. The heat season may begin before heat season. The recovery window may shrink before people notice. The first health alert may arrive before the first official month of summer. The weak point may be an apartment, a care home room, A school classroom, a work shift, a rail line, a power margin, or a public cooling plan that starts too late. This is not just a heat wave. This is a calendar failure written through the body at night. But there is one more step before the conclusion. A system analysis can become dangerous if it overclaims. Not every problem during a heat wave is caused by the heat wave. Not every death, delay, outage, illness, or disruption can be assigned to one event without evidence. The warning is already strong enough without exaggeration. The final task is to draw the evidence line. The warning does not need exaggeration. The evidence is already enough. This is the point where the story has to slow down, because a heat wave can be misunderstood in two opposite ways. One mistake is to treat it as ordinary weather because the sun is shining and the sky looks calm. The other mistake is to turn every consequence into proof of one single cause before the evidence can support it. Both mistakes weaken the response. One makes the danger look smaller than it is. The other makes the warning easier to dismiss. The honest line is stronger. Here is what can be said with confidence. A major early heat wave struck Western Europe in late May. Official climate and weather agencies recorded extreme heat, broken May records, and unusually large temperature anomalies. The United Kingdom Met Office reported a provisional national May record at Kew Gardens. Copernicus reported daily average temperatures more than 10 degrees Celsius above normal across parts of western France, England, and Wales. Public health agencies issued heat alerts before the old rhythm of summer had fully taken over. That is real. It is not interpretation. It is the official signal. Here is the second thing that can be said with confidence. The event was not only about the afternoon maximum, the nighttime minimum mattered. The body does not recover from heat only because the sun goes down. It recovers when the surrounding environment cools enough to reduce strain. If the night stays warm, the body keeps working. The heart keeps carrying load. Sleep becomes weaker. Hydration becomes more important. Medication, age, illness, isolation, and housing quality become part of the risk pathway. That is not fear. That is physiology. Here is the third thing that can be said with confidence. Heat risk does not land evenly. A person with a cooled bedroom does not experience the same heat wave as a person in a top-floor flat that will not cool at night. A healthy adult with flexible work does not experience the same heat as an older person living alone. A shaded neighborhood does not experience the same heat as a dense block of hard surfaces. A household with money, mobility, and social support has more ways to interrupt the pathway than a household without them. The weather may be regional. The vulnerability is local. Here is the fourth thing that can be said with confidence. Europe has already learned, through painful history, that heat can become a public health disaster without destroying visible structures. The 2003 heat wave showed how persistent heat, warm nights, older bodies, isolation, urban exposure, and delayed response can produce enormous harm. That precedent does not mean the May heat wave will produce the same outcome. It does mean the mechanism is not imaginary. Heat has already shown how it can move through rooms, bodies, care systems, and hospitals. That is the evidence line. But there are also things that should not be claimed too quickly. It is not scientifically honest to say that every hospital visit during the heat wave was caused by the heat wave. Some illnesses would have happened anyway. Some disruptions may have had other causes. Some local failures may have been coincidental. Some numbers require later analysis before they can be attributed with confidence. A heat wave can raise risk without being the sole cause of every outcome inside the affected region. That distinction matters. A warning becomes stronger when it does not overreach. It is also not honest to say one event alone proves every future disaster. A single heat wave is not a complete map of the future. It is one event inside a changing climate system. It can be studied. It can reveal weaknesses. It can fit a larger pattern. But it should not be turned into a prophecy where every detail repeats. The future will not copy one May heat wave exactly. It will produce new combinations of timing, pressure patterns, humidity, soil, moisture, water demand, infrastructure, stress, and human vulnerability. The point is not that this exact event will repeat. The point is that the assumptions it challenged are already under strain. The old assumption was that dangerous heat belongs mainly to high summer. The May heat wave challenged that. The old assumption was that the daytime peak is the main number to watch. The hot nights challenged that. The old assumption was that a public alert is enough if the forecast is correct. The uncooled bedroom challenged that. The old assumption was that preparedness can follow the familiar calendar. The atmosphere challenged that. This is the difference between weather and system risk. Weather asks what happened in the air. System risk asks what the air did after it arrived. Did it enter housing? Did it change sleep? Did it increase care needs? Did it reduce worker capacity? Did it raise electricity demand? Did it stress hospitals? Did it expose the gap between warning and protection? Did it reveal that a city can know heat is coming and still have rooms where recovery is physically impossible? The answer in this event is not uniform. Some systems worked. Warnings were issued, records were measured, alerts reached the public, many people changed behavior, many families checked on relatives, many health and care workers responded. Preparedness did exist. That matters. A serious analysis should not erase progress, but the event also showed the remaining gap. The gap between official detection and indoor protection. The gap between the calendar and the climate. The gap between a weather alert and a room that cools. The gap between knowing the risk and having the resources to act. That is the unresolved warning. Return to the first signal. By late May, the official map was already lit. A climate agency saw the anomaly. A weather service saw the record. Health agencies saw enough risk to activate alerts. A large region of Western Europe was not simply warmer than usual. It was operating outside the late spring range that people, buildings, and routines still expected. At first, it looked like a number. Then the number became a pattern. The headline number was the afternoon peak, 35.1 degrees Celsius at Kew Gardens, more than 10 degrees Celsius above normal in parts of the region. A May record being rewritten while the event was still happening. But the hidden number was quieter, the overnight minimum, the number that says whether the room cool, the number that says whether the body can stand down, the number that says whether the next day begins from rest or from debt. This is not just a heat wave. This is a nighttime recovery failure arriving before the system's summer clock. That sentence is the spine of the story because it changes where the viewer looks. Not only at the hottest place on the map, not only at the red color scale, not only at the record station, look at the night, look at the room, look at the top floor flat, look at the care home bedroom, look at the worker waking after broken sleep, look at the hospital after several hot nights, look at the alert that arrives before people feel summer has officially started. The future will not be decided only by peak temperature. It will be decided by recovery. How much recovery does a body get before the next hot day? How much recovery does a building get before the next afternoon? How much recovery does a hospital get before the next patient surge? How much recovery does the grid get before the next demand peak? How much recovery does a city get before the next early season alert? A resilient system is not one that never feels heat. That world is gone. A resilient system is one that preserves recovery under heat. It keeps rooms cool enough for sleep. It checks on people before symptoms become emergencies. It gives workers safer hours. It creates shade where people wait. It treats cooling as health protection, not luxury. It prepares care homes before the first severe heat. It warns clearly, without exaggerating. It starts early enough that the first hot night is not the first time anyone takes action. That kind of preparedness is not dramatic. It does not look like a rescue scene. It looks like a phone call before the crisis. A shaded bus stop. A cooled room. A landlord required to reduce dangerous indoor heat. A care worker with time to check hydration. A school that moves activities before children overheat. A hospital that knows which wards will get hot. A public message that explains nighttime risk. A neighbor who knocks before morning. A city that treats May heat as real heat. Those are the quiet interventions that prevent the loud outcomes. The event will pass. The atmosphere will move. The map will change color. The record will sit in the archive. The alert will expire. People will go back to work, travel, school, hospitals, farms, care homes, and apartments. The visible emergency will fade, but the thing it revealed will remain. A system built around old seasonal assumptions is being tested by heat that no longer waits for the old calendar. That does not mean the future is already lost. It means the margin is becoming visible. It means the weak points can be named. It means the next warning does not have to be interpreted as surprise. The room can be cooled, the neighbor can be checked, the care plan can begin earlier, the workplace can adjust, the city can shade, the health system can monitor nights, not only afternoons. The public can learn that early heat is not harmless because it arrives before summer. The evidence is already enough to act, not to panic, to act, because the danger of this heat wave was never only that Europe got hot in May. The deeper danger was that the heat arrived before the system had fully changed posture. It moved from atmosphere to surface, from surface to building, from building to bedroom, from bedroom to body, and from body to the systems that must respond. It exposed the place where preparation cannot remain a plan. It must become physical protection. The map showed heat, the body received load, the bedroom tested recovery, the calendar fell behind. That is the story the May heatwave leaves behind. The next heatwave may arrive in another country. It may arrive with different humidity, different wind, different soil moisture, different sea temperatures, different alerts, and different records. It may not look the same, but the central question will return. Will the system still have time to recover before the next load arrives? Or will the next warning find the same small room, still too warm after midnight, carrying yesterday's heat into tomorrow's emergency?